General overview of the product, and I'm going to spend most of the time explaining the tools that come in our most popular HomeMaker set. This here is a little bit about the company. We've been around since the 1949. We do about $2 million in sales every year, and we have 16 million customers nationwide. Cutco is a very well-known brand. We are the top-selling brand of American-made cutlery in the world. We are the top-selling brand of knives in the US and Canada, and we have been for decades. People love the stuff, and everybody loves supporting an American-made company. I'm going to skip quite a bit here. If you'd like to go through the presentation in more detail, you can visit viewcutco.com, and that's where you can find this little PowerPoint if you want to go through it yourself. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you probably already know that having junky knives in the kitchen is just a pain. Most people don't think about it, but you end up spending a lot more money when you invest or when you buy cheap products at Walmart or Target or even Bed Bath & Beyond, dollar store. And what happens is you buy them over and over and over and over again, and you never have a good tool. So something as silly as a can opener, people struggle to find a can opener because they're buying a new one every 6 months, every year. They break down. And before you know it, you spend $100, you have 3 can openers in the drawer that are just cluttering up your drawers, and you don't have one that works. Investing in a Cutco can opener, you're going to have a best-in-class product that's going to last forever. And so that's the idea with our stuff, is you buy it once, you never have to replace it. When it comes to the knives, there's great material. We have high-carbon stainless steel blades, nickel-silver rivets, which won't expand or contract in the dishwasher or when they're exposed to heat in the kitchen. And our thermoresin handle, so the thermoresin material we use in the handle, it melts at 360 degrees. So unless you plan on baking your knives, you should be okay. They're not going to melt, chip, crack, or break. And if you ever have any problems with them, of course, it's covered in our forever guarantee, and we replace it for you free of charge. Now, Cutco has 2 types of edges. We have our straight edges, which you'll see later on. The straight edges are our world's sharpest knives. They were featured on Modern Marvels. You can find that video on YouTube. Just search Modern Marvels YouTube, or Modern Marvels Cutco, excuse me. And they tested them against Wusthof, Henkel, Schön, the German, Japanese brands, all the top brands from around the world. And what they found was our straight edges were the sharpest out of the box, meaning the sharpest when they were new, but they also held their edge for longer than any of the other tools on the market. So our straight edges are really, really excellent. With that said, what I found is most of the customers tend to prefer our double D or double durable edge. Most serrated knives tend to rip and tear, and they don't give you a good clean cut. I'm sure you've experienced the frustration of using a serrated knife. And so what Cutco did was redesign that idea. We put 3 cutting edges in between each of these little points here. So as opposed to a normal serrated knife that cuts with the points, what our points do is protect the straight edges located inside from touching the cutting board, from hitting other knives if they're misstored in a drawer, and it keeps our edges sharper for much, much longer. So they're going to cut clean like a straight edge, but they're going to stay sharp for a very, very, very long time. Our double D edges you can expect to hold an edge for 7 to 10 years without needing sharpening. Many customers have had theirs for 15, 20, even 30 years without sharpening. Include a sharpener for the straight edge tools. The double D edges stay sharp for so long that by the time they need to be sharpened, the company will sharpen them for you free of charge. So anybody that tells you a knife is going to stay sharp forever, the bottom line is that they're just lying to you. That's impossible. And so we know that although our edges are going to stay sharp from anywhere from 6 to 10 years, eventually they're going to need service. And that's why our guarantee covers forever sharpening. So by forever, this is an unconditional guarantee. You don't need a receipt. You don't need your proof of purchase. If you own the product, it's guaranteed. It's something you can give to kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and it'll have the same guarantee. And so this is really a legacy product for your home and for your family. Many of my customers inherited their product from their mother or from their grandmother, and it stays in the family for many, many years. So I have many customers that have been happy owners for 2, 3, and soon to be even 4 generations in their family. In the guarantee, you get forever sharpness. You can call the company and schedule an appointment with a sales rep who will come out to the house and sharpen them for you right in the kitchen for free. We're the only company that does that. Or you can mail them back to the factory and have them refurbished. The refurbishing process is excellent. It's something we recommend you do every 10 to 15 years. When you mail your products back, the company will replace them or repair them they'll rebuff the handle, they'll repolish the blade, and they'll put a brand new edge. So every time you send them back, they come back like a brand new knife. We recommend you do the in-home sharpening every 4 to 6 years, and you mail them back to the factory to be sharpened every 10 to 20 years as needed. You have a forever replacement for misuse and abuse, and a 15-day money-back guarantee, so you can use the product in your home for 15 days. And if you're not 100% impressed, you can mail them back and get a full refund on your order. There's some testimonials, which you can also find on YouTube. And now let's dive into the set. So this is the main thing I want to discuss today, is the tools that come in our basic HomeMaker set and how to use them. This is a great resource once you own the product to refer back to if you have questions on how to use the tools. And we're going to dive in with the first one, which is our paring knife. Any set you buy is going to include a paring knife in it. Hopefully these videos will play. Sometimes they don't come out quite as well in the recording, but paring knives tend to have a short stubby handle, which will eat into your palm and are kind of uncomfortable to use. So Cutco designed our paring knife with a longer handle so you have more control when you're using them in the air. And this is a tool you'll use primarily for peeling and paring any cuts you're going to be doing in the air. Because it's small, it tends to hold an edge better if you keep it to the uses in the air. Cutting tomatoes, strawberries, bananas, celery, or carrots into soup, mangoes or avocados, any kind of peeling or paring you might need to do in the kitchen. The next tool in the set is the trimmer. The trimmer is our #1 selling tool of all time. I refer to it as our small utility knife or the go-to knife. If you've ever tried to cut a tomato with a dull knife, you know the struggle. It smashes, it doesn't give you a clean cut, especially ripe tomatoes. But you can see with this tool, you can get some pretty paper-thin slices without smashing the knife at all, without smashing your food. And as a rule of thumb, you want the knife to be about 1 to 2 inches larger than the food that you're cutting. And so this tool is ideal for any cuts about the size of your fist, things like tomatoes or apples. You can also use it to trim fats off of meats, butterfly a chicken breast, and different cuts of that nature. You can pull through, and because of that double D edge, you can cut forward, backwards, and straight down. So that's your trimmer. The next tool in the set is the Cutco spatula spreader. And this is, I call it mom's best friend. If you ever do sandwiches for the kids, if you ever do any brownies, cakes, or lasagnas, this guy is amazing. I found that this tool takes a little bit of getting used to, not because it's hard to use, but because you're not used to having a tool like this in your kitchen. People have been using steak knives for this type of job their whole life. And so you need to really make the effort to grab this knife instead of a steak knife when you're doing sandwiches. If you're doing bagels in the morning, in my house, I love Nutella. And this spreads Nutella like you wouldn't believe. It's so much faster, so much easier than using a steak knife. And when you're doing your brownies, you know, brownies are always really, really hard to get out of that pan. The first one's always a pain. But because it's a flexible knife, because it's a flexible spatula, look at how it pops out that first brownie. You can ice it with the same tool, and you only have one thing to clean when you're done. So as opposed to having a knife and a spatula, it's a 2-in-1 tool. It saves time. It's very comfortable, very, very easy to use. And so that's our Cutco spatula spreader. Then we have our petite carving set, which includes the petite carver and the turning fork. The petite carver is your medium utility knife. So in the set, you get a small utility tool. That's the trimmer we used on the tomato earlier. A medium utility tool, which is this guy, petite carver you see right here. And you get a large utility knife for turkeys, hams, and roasts, which I'll show you in a moment. But the petite carver is excellent for all of your medium-sized cuts. The turning fork is great for getting pickles out of jars. That last olive, when it's stuck at the bottom of the jar, that does a good job of getting it out. You can turn bacon or vegetables on the stove because the prongs on that fork are pretty close together. And so I love that turning fork. It's so easy to use and it's super sharp on the point. So if you ever have trouble getting your husband or the kids out of bed, you can just poke them with the fork. They'll jump right out. It's a great tool. Saves you a lot of time in the morning. So that's your petite carving set. This is also what I use if I'm lazy one day and just pick up a rotisserie chicken from Publix. It's the perfect size to carve a medium meat like your rotisserie chickens. The next tool is the butcher knife or the heavy duty knife. I love this knife. It's one that I call the Big Mama or the Protector because you're going to use it for the tough jobs that would normally damage your other tools. So it's not necessarily an everyday knife, but when you need it, and it's great to have. So cutting through watermelons, squashes, tougher cuts like frozen foods, maybe separating frozen burger patties or hot dogs, cutting through bones, any of your tougher cuts, it does a great job. I also enjoy using it to butterfly my chicken breast or take fats off of my meats. If I have a big piece of churrasco steak or some sort of steak with that layer of fat on the top, you just want to take that layer off, this tool is great and it glides right through your raw meats. So that's going to be your heavy duty or your butcher knife, and it cuts right through. The next tool is your vegetable knife, also known as the chopper or the chef's knife. I find this is one of the most misused tools in the set. People tend to see a big knife and think it's like the butcher's knife for your heavy-duty meats and tough cuts, but it actually has a very fine edge that's designed to do things like onions, celery, basil, cilantro, garlic, things you want to chop, mince, and dice and get really, really small. And the trick to using this tool is to keep the tip on the cutting board and rock through. So the knife never leaves the board. The tip stays on the cutting board and you chop using the back end of the blade. So this is going to be for all your vegetables, all your chopping, mincing, dicing, soups, stews, stir fries, those types of cuts. We have our bread knife, also known as the slicer. And this is a great tool. In Miami, we call it God's gift to Cuba. Because if you've ever had a fresh piece of Cuban bread and you try to cut it, oftentimes it smashes. And when you're entertaining, it's never nice to have a tray with a bunch of smashed bread on it. And so this guy will give you a good clean cut on freshly baked bread. Even if it's soft, it'll cut right through without smashing. A couple fun things that I use it for: if I'm doing coleslaw, I love this to shred my head of lettuce. My mother uses it to layer cakes. Or if you have a delicate cut, like maybe an angel fruit cake or something of that nature that'll often smash, this guy will cut through without smashing at all. So you get a bread knife in the set as well. And lastly is our master carving set. So this is going to be for special occasions, for barbecues, for birthdays, hams, turkeys, roasts, bigger cuts of that nature. The carving fork is larger than the one I showed you before, and it's two-pronged instead of three. So these two prongs are farther apart, and they're much easier to hold big pieces of meat together. I also will use both forks at the same time to grab a piece of meat and move it around from one place to another. So you have your master carving set for your special occasions. Bring the tradition of carving back to the table. And the last thing, of course, is going to be our table knives. Now, these are almost like if a butter knife and a steak knife had a baby, this is what you'd end up with. Because even though it might look like a small butter knife, this thing cuts like a steak knife.
This is a table knife test.
Let me go ahead and mute this real quick. So here you'll see a regular steak knife and a piece of leather. He's going to try to cut through it. It'll rip and tear. Pretty frustrating. But with the Cutco double D edge, when he grabs that table knife, it just slices right through. And so with that table knife, it'll remove that earthquake effect at the table when you're cutting back and forth and the whole table's shaking and it won't cut through the meat. This will slide through in one cut. You can cut forwards, backwards, and straight down with it. You can see he just pulled through that leather, a very clean cut. And now he's going to cut forward with the knife as well. And so you can cut forwards, backwards, straight down. Your set will bring 8 of these. However, many customers will add a few more so that they can have a full setting of 12. You have your choice of a honey or a cherry oak block. I prefer the cherry if you do the white. If you choose the white knives, I think the white on the cherry just really pops. The honey is definitely more traditional. It looks really nice with the red or with the classic handles. A little bit more traditional, and it kind of depends on your cabinets and your kitchen, which of the two work best for you. Your set will also include a cutting board, and the cutting boards are one of the main things that tend to dull your knives. People that use glass, granite, or bamboo and harder woods, although those cutting boards last a long time, they kill the edge on your knife. Now, most people will try to stay away from plastic boards because they have to replace them all the time. Plastic boards get cuts in them as you use them because they're taking the impact as opposed to the blade taking the impact. And ideally, that's what you want. That's what keeps the knives sharper for longer, is having the ability to cut on them without dulling the edge. Once these boards wear out, which they will inevitably, typically depending on how many you have and how often you use them, they will You can mail them back to the factory every 5 to 7 years, and they'll replace them with a brand new one for you free of charge. You can also bleach these, so if you ever stain them with chorizo or mango or a pineapple, spray some bleach, let it sit, and it looks like brand new when you're done, and they're dishwasher safe. Let's skip through some of this here. So let me review one more time the tools that come in the set. Quick review: you get a paring knife for cutting the tops off of strawberries, peeling and paring any cuts in your air. You have a small, medium, and large utility knife. Again, you want to pick the knife that's about 1 to 2 inches larger than the food that you're cutting. So the small utility knife will be tomatoes, apples, cuts about the size of your fist. Medium utility knife will be carving a rotisserie chicken, pineapples, a head of lettuce, medium-sized cuts. And a large one will be hams, turkeys, roasts, special occasions. You have your Cutco spatula threader for sandwiches, baking, brownies, cakes, lasagnas. Your chopping knife for vegetables. And your heavy-duty butcher knife to protect the rest of the tools when you have bones, squashes, frozen foods, tougher cuts. And of course, like any knife set, you'll get a bread knife as well for cutting your bread. Last thing I'll do is just go over a couple of the prices. I'm not going to go over the price of the Cutco sets because those change from time to time, but just so you have an idea of kind of some of the other brands that are out there. Wüsthof, I mentioned briefly earlier. This knife brand has been around for over 200 years. They're the German knives. Anytime you hear people talk about the German knives, they're referring to Wüsthof. And although these tools are amazing, I mean, if Cutco didn't exist, I'd probably go out and buy Wüsthof. The bottom line is they just don't last as long as the Cutco knives do. The edges don't stay sharp quite as long. They're much more high maintenance, so they can't be dishwashed. They have to be sharpened every time you use them. And the company recommends you update the set every 10 to 15 years. And by update, basically they mean go out and get a whole new set. And so these knives will tend to last you about 10 to 15 years, whereas Cutco knives, we recommend you send them back and have them refurbished every 10 to 15 years, and you get a brand new set. You can go out and spend $200, $300 on a nice chef knife from Wüsthof or Schön. The thing's going to cut great, but if someone comes by and drops it and the tip breaks, if they leave it by the burner and the handle melts, well, now you're out a $200, $300 knife. With Cutco, those things are covered in our guarantee, and we replace the tool for you for free. So again, the idea is you buy the set once, you never have to replace it ever again.